In this video, we're going to learn how to simplify expressions involving complex numbers. And when we talk about complex numbers are numbers of the form a plus bi. So any number of the form a plus bi is termed as what? A complex number. Where a is your real part, okay, and the b is your imaginary part, and we call the I as the imaginary unit. All right, and whenever you have the I multiplying, so if you multiply I by I, that is I squared, and this is the same as -1. So I squared, remember, I squared is always -1. Now let's look at how we can answer this question. When we have an exponent, exponents are repeated numbers or repeated expression. So this expression right here can also be written as 1/8 plus square root of 17 divided by 8, and you're going to multiply by itself. That is what the square part means. So now that you've expressed it in this form, you're going to apply the distributive property. So the distributive property, you take the first term and you're going to multiply by each of the terms you have in this expression. So you take 1/8, you multiply by 1/8 plus square root of 17i/8. Then you take the second term you have in the first expression. So you have plus square root of 17/8i, and you multiply by the terms you have in the second expression. So 1/8 plus square root of 17i/8. So now we're going to multiply. So 1/8 times 1/8 plus 1/8 times square root of 17i/8 plus square root of 17i/8 times 1/8. Then you have the last part, which is square root of 17/8i times square root of 17i/8. So 1/8 times 1/8 gives you 1/64, plus you have square root of 17i/64. So 1/8 times square root of 17i/8 gives you square root of 17i/64. Plus, so these two would also give you square root of 17i/64. Then if you multiply, so you have root of 17 times root of 17 times I squared. So I times I gives you I squared, and you still have your 8 times 8, which is your 64. Then you keep on simplifying. So we have 1/64 plus square root of 17i/64 plus square root of 17i/64 plus, so if you have square root of 17 times square root of 17, this is the same as square root of 17 times 17. Okay, and if you multiply 17 by 17, that is 289. So square root of 289 gives you what? 17. So this is the same as 17i/64. So now we have 1/64, and we're going to add these two terms together. Let's go. We have same base, which is 64. Okay, so we can keep the common base and add the exponent. So it's just like having 1 over 2 plus 1 over 2. And if you add 1 over 2 to 1 over 2, you keep the common base and you add the numerator value. So 1 plus 1 gives you 2, and that gives you 1. So that is the same thing we are going to do here. We're going to keep the common base, which is 64. And if you add root of 17i plus root of 17i, that gives you 2 root of 17i. Okay, there is 1 in front of the square roots, which we do not write. And we also have 1 in front of the other square root of 17i, which we do not indicate. So if you add 1 plus 1, that gives you 2, and you have your square root of 17i, and you divide by 64. So now, remember at the beginning I said I squared. If you multiply I by I, if you multiply the imaginary part by itself, is the same as -1. So in place of I squared, we're going to plug in -1 and divide by 64. So we then have 1 over 64, and I'm going to bring the 17 times -1 over 64. I'm going to pull it here. So that is -17 over 64 plus 2 square root of 17i over 64. So now if you have 1 over 64 minus 17 over 64, okay, you're going to simplify this. So you have a common base, which is 64, and 1 minus 17 is -16. Then you have your 2 over 64 square root of 17i. But this is not simplified, so we're going to keep on simplifying. So 16 divided by 64, sorry. So -16 divided by 64 gives you -1 over 4. And if you divide 2 by 64, that gives you 1 over 32. So if you multiply 1 over 32 by square root of 17i, that gives you 17i over 32. So now this is our expression in the form a plus bi. So this is how you will simplify an expression that involves complex numbers. I hope this helps. Thanks.